evening, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tova Goldfine, and this is TMS Roundtable Global. We stream live every week, every Monday night, going on 2 years. Thanks to Michael and Rose for this partnership. We stream live from Israel, Australia, New York, all over the globe. We've been lucky to meet many, many people. And I believe this is the only show on Facebook where we interact with the audience, with our guests, doctors and health professionals and movie directors and people that have self-healed from many, many different chronic pain conditions and autoimmune disease. And I think we all share a common mission on this show. And this is why I think it's special that all the doctors and all the people that come, we're all about helping ourselves heal from chronic pain and autoimmune disease. And I'm going to introduce my co-host and professional partner, Rose Hoy from Australia, streaming live from Down Under.
That's right. Good morning, everyone. Now, today we have Michael Galinsky, filmmaker, should I say, and author, if I could use that word, of All the Rage, Saved by Sano. And we also have Forrest Smith. Now, Forrest Smith is the author also of TMS Wiki. Now, you know, as Tova has said, we've brought many, many people to your visual, to our visual audience. And last week we had Bethany Rains, Dr. Bethany Rains, who talked about the neuroscience. Now we have got Forrest Smith talking about an application of that neuroscience. So thank you for sharing your insights and your knowledge and all the rest. And please, audience, be aware, as Tova said just now, it's about you taking this up. It's all right for us to tell you about it, but the bottom line is it's got to be your journey and it's got to be your will to heal. Your will, not someone else's will, but yours. So welcome, Forrest. I think maybe if we would just introduce Forrest again, and would you briefly tell everyone about your own little journey into how you became the TMS Wiki person, and now you're doing this pain reprocessing therapy with people.
Yeah. So absolutely a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for organizing this. It is really a pleasure to be on and to be discussing these important topics. So as Rose mentioned, I'm a recoveree. Hey, Scotty. I recovered from 18 years of my own neuroplastic pain, or TMS, whatever you want to call it, back in, I believe it was 2009. And the approach that I used when I was healing, I found later on, lined up very well with the approach that Alan Gordon wrote about in his book, The Way Out. Then that he is now referring to as pain reprocessing therapy. So I won't, I mean, I could tell, but I told in a previous appearance here about my personal story of going through that 18 years of pain and of fear. Am I ever going to be able to support myself and just the ongoing pain? But here, I'm here to talk a little bit more about a series of book discussions that I've been running recently about this new book, about The Way Out and PRT, and how it is helping people, and how we use this format of discussions to help people actually do the work. And I think it's very relevant to what you were just saying, Rose and Tova, both of you, to this idea of how important it is for people to embrace the work and take it on as their own mission, and be ready to take those steps. Because in some sense, the most important healing always happens done by the actual recovery, the person who is recovering. So
could you also add, and if you want to agree, you could agree, but in the most stressful moments, not on the yoga mat or on vacation, like in the most stressful moments, you have to practice this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
Yes.
and on a day-to-day basis also. So it happens when, yeah, everything is on your shoulders, and it also happens when you are when you're just putting everything on your shoulders and you don't need to. So a lot of it, can also be how you create that stress out of nothing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not really out of nothing. It's more about, as you said, taking on the stress, being the person that fixes it all the time, or being the perfect person, or being the person that everyone goes to, and then they become crushed. Yeah. So yeah, true. So tell me about this pain reprocessing therapy though, and how does it gel with what you did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you also mention, like, what was it called that you did that helped you, that seemed to
Yeah. I mean, let me actually first, so there's a couple of different ways we could approach this. First is I could tell you the story of Alan and some of the stories that he tells in the books, and my experiences of, in some sense, being alongside or knowing him at those times and watching those events unfold. So we could talk about Casey and his recovery on the syndicated TV show The Doctors. Or another way to approach it is just to talk about my personal recovery and some of the themes in the book. Let's start there. So, pain reprocessing therapy starts with the idea that pain arises, and this is based on neuroscience, which I'm sure Bethany in last week's episode was telling you a good deal about this, but it's based on this neuroscience that the pain that we feel is very, very real, that any pain sensation that we have is very, very real, but it is fundamentally caused by a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, a misprocessing of sensations, harmless sensations that are coming into our body from our nerve cells up through our nociceptive system. And so what pain reprocessing therapy says is we are misprocessing those signals. We need to learn how to reprocess them. So the natural question is, what's the difference? What's the difference between, processing it well in a healing way or processing it poorly in a way that causes us pain? And the key issue, as I understand it, and I want to be very clear early on, I do not speak for Alan. I've been there. I'm running this book group. I've read the book. I love the book. I healed myself, but he's going to use different language, and I'm just here to talk about my own experience.
We want to hear from Forrest.
Okay, good. I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah. So but what I take from what he said and building on the work of others is that it comes down to fear. That fear is and pressure is what causes harmless signals to turn into painful signals. That fear is meant to be, that pain, there we go. Pain is meant to be a danger signal. That pain is something which has evolved to help us get away from things which could harm us. So in the book, Alan tells a story about different animals, and some have no fear and some have a huge amount of fear. And who's going to survive longer on the Serengeti? Well, clearly, fear can protect us. If there is a lion around the corner, we got to get out of there. And so fear has evolved as a protective mechanism. But in today's society, and especially with certain personalities, that fear can get out of control, and it can cause our nervous system to misinterpret perfectly harmless things as pain. So that's that idea of that misinterpretation.
Yeah.
So pain reprocessing therapy.
Does rage come in there?
I know. Pain reprocessing therapy comes in the idea of saying that it is not fear. And I think I love your question, Tova, about that. To me, and this is my own thinking, but yeah, I've thought so much about rage. I see the connection there as being pressure. To me, what resonates with me in my own life and with a lot of the people I've seen is we put so much pressure on ourselves. I think, Rosie, you were just talking about this also, and that leads to rage, it leads to fear, whatever is boiling inside of us and causing that tension, causing that fear, causing us to take these harmless symptoms and turn them into pain, that is the cause. And if we can find some way to calm our nervous systems, to achieve some level of equanimity, then I think we're much healthier. And that's why I loved it when you were talking earlier about meditation. It feels like meditation is in the background. And several of our greatest leaders in the TMS world or the PRT world are meditators. Alan, big meditator. Howard, big meditator. Many others. Do you folks meditate? I'm a little bit too scatterbrained. Excellent.
I love meditation.
And it was one of John Sarna's, look, one of the big, Rose and I are still giving out the movie every day to clients. So the movie's still out there and it's very popular. But the point is, people would say, well, he's not telling us what to do. There was this fear around, he's not telling us what to do. It's just, telling us what it is. And all over the internet, you can see that Sarno mentions journaling, knowledge, meditation, the first top three, mindfulness.
Yep. It's all about getting in touch with our emotions and allowing those emotions to be there so that we can calm down our nervous system and be in a much better state.
Right. I mean, because I think what we're talking about is fear of our emotions, right? So we may not be afraid of the lion that's going to rip our leg off, but we might feel a great deal of stress about the fact that our mother might give us a dirty look. I mean, like these control mechanisms.
Perfectly said, Michael. Perfectly said.
Because that dirty look could then turn into an explosion or some other kind of control thing.
Smack. Yeah.
But the thing I was really wanting to jump in with was, I think a lot of what we're talking about has to do with stuff that Hillary Jacobs Hendel talks about in the change triangle, right? So a lot of times we're afraid because we have an emotion that we're not connected to. And so that emotion is physicalized in a way that we have a physical response without even being conscious of what's going on. So now we're having a physical response, which is terrifying because we feel terrified and we don't even know what it is. So anxiety plays a role, but anxiety is maybe covering for fear or rage or something else. But we've also learned to be kind of, a lot of people have either hypoarousal, which means they kind of like just go into freeze mode, or you might have hyperarousal, which means you kind of go into a rage without even knowing it's going to happen. And I think it's really interesting how those two interact, because sometimes someone will go into hypoarousal, meaning that they just kind of disappear, but it's important that they understand what you're saying, and that can be enraging if they're just not even hearing you. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is individual to us, but it's also highly interactive in all of our relationships. So it's important that we understand what makes us have a physical response. And that's a big part of the TMS PRT work, is understanding, oh, wait, what made me respond? Oh, when people, freeze up like that, I feel terrified that something bad will happen. So it's really starting to pay attention to what's going on in our body and being able to adjust to that. And it's not easy. And oftentimes we need help. We need a therapist to sit with us and say, I noticed you were telling me this, but it seems like you were maybe feeling something else. Can we sit with that for a minute? And that's where meditation comes in. It's where yoga comes in. It just an acceptance practice. So like yoga can be an acceptance practice, as can meditation. So if you get on the mat and you notice, like myself, wow, I'm always trying to push just a little too fucking hard to get into that pose, rather than just, I just do the small adjustment and that's how I get in. It's, if you start to realize what you're doing physically, it also has to do with what you're doing mentally and emotionally. And so back to this very simple idea that we really are the only person who can lead that, because we're all going to process information and ideas differently. And when we think everybody's processing it like we are, or they should be processing it like we are, then we're going to be constantly in unconscious conflict with everyone around us, and mostly ourselves.
And so the healing ends up, I feel, being a journey. You know, if you're with a therapist, if you're with a practitioner, sometimes they can do some of the work for you. But if you are doing it on your own, what I heard you saying is that you need to learn to read your own signals. You need to understand, how are you feeling? Because once you understand how you're feeling, then you can take better care of yourself. You can give yourself the care, not have the pressure, you know, not have that rage inside of you, not have that fear inside of you.
Right. And even notice that somehow you internalize the idea that you don't deserve care or that you shouldn't have care. It's about unpacking these things that we think are who we are, rather than not only what we've learned, but what has been carried down in our genes. Because so much of this, I think, you know, I was actually just looking a lot into the ACE study today and thinking a lot about trauma. I was trying to write something about generational trauma, but it's not just generational, like meaning from parent to child. It's literally generational. You know, like my parents were both part of the silent generation, which means they were born during the Depression and came, you know, to their teenage years during World War II. Now, what they learned was, shut the fuck up and don't be a bother, because we're trying to feed you and bombs might drop, right? And so they just really, you know, and that's who my parents were. And I look back and I go, I don't know anything about their childhoods. They never, I mean, I know maybe 2 or 3 little stories, and they ran from that place. And they became a psychologist, a social worker, but they never really dealt with it because it was just so unallowed to deal with their own trauma. I don't think they were even aware of it. We didn't talk about trauma until what, like, I think last week, right? Like, that's when we're starting to, and that's really, you know, it's really interesting to me because, you know, I think I was aware of ideas related to trauma when we were working in the film. And that's why we had Gabor Mate in the film, because he brought that in and showed us how that creates so much autoimmune disease and cancer, et cetera, right? All these things are connected. But it's only recently that I can start to see that, oh, wow, just through the generations, right? Like the boomers came up and they were brought up in the realm of the silent generation. And so they didn't really even understand the trauma, that they realized something was wrong and they had to act. So they kind of acted it out and created change, but they didn't even know what they were dealing with. And they didn't even have any concept of trauma, right? It's only in the last 10 years. I mean, and even if you look at the ACE study, the point is they're only really talking about direct effects, right? Did you have abuse in the home? Was anyone beaten? Were people in jail? Was there drug abuse? Not, you know, did your parents live during the Holocaust? You know? And so it's really hard for us to accept how profound those epigenetic actions that have been taking place in succeeding generations that we still are not really even starting to untangle. Like, let's talk about, you know, 500 years of slavery. Like, that's a lot of epigenetic trauma that, you know, you know what I mean? So it's all these things are really complex. And I know I kind of went off course.
Well, you haven't. You've joined all the links together in actual fact. But, you know, Bowlby, it's in the 1950s that they realized that trauma was so influential. But getting it out there is the problem.
Right. So a few people were talking about it, and but it wasn't accepted within that realm, which was because we have such a resistance to paying attention to emotions.
Here's the fact. I'm going to bring this back to Rob because to Forrest, because why did the Eastern culture bring mindfulness and meditation, or the Indian culture and yoga into their lives to calm their nervous system down? What did they do that now Alan Gordon is writing a book?
Yeah.
You know, whatever exposure therapy, whatever it was called when Rob did it, I want to understand now because we have a tool. Yeah. And what you and Rose talked about was true. Not everybody can like get to the tool right away. They're like, I'm too messed up in my head. I can't get there, as opposed to, well, just breathe. But people can't just breathe, right? They can't just get there because they're questioning and they're insecure and they're doubting. And so we can't just get to the brain reprocessing therapy yet. Right.
Right. You're not going to think your way out of the problem if the problem is the thinking. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're not going to pressure your way out of the problem if the problem is the pressure. You know, if you're like, okay, I really got to breathe. You know, that's the classic challenge of meditation and of mindfulness. And I think that walking that fine line is very challenging. It takes a lot of, say again?
Nothing yet.
It's very challenging. And that was one of the insights that I got out of this book group. So Alan published the book last fall, and we did a book group, and we went through, my co-host and I, Michelle, who's a therapist who works with Alan at the PPC, Pain Psychology Center. And we did chapter by chapter, and we went through. And the overall theme, which I saw from that entire thing, was people realizing how to walk that fine line.
Wow.
I mean, we can say, just pay attention to your breathing, but you could really pay attention to your breathing in a way that makes you more afraid, ramps up your things, makes you judge yourself, makes you put more pressure in yourself, makes you more enraged. So how do you do it in a way that takes good care of yourself and is kind, especially if, this idea of the generational trauma is behind you, where maybe you weren't given those skills to take care of yourself. You weren't given those skills to listen to yourself. How do you learn those skills?
Okay.
What's the answer?
Give us.
I think
you just teed it up.
I know. What a tease. It's terrible. Yes. What is the answer? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the conclusion that we came to, and the recordings of the book group are all up on prtrecovery.org. You can just go there and look for the book group. But the conclusion that many of us came to is that it really is a journey. It's just like, how do you meditate? I think it's so hard to say. You can't just tell someone how to meditate. So the way to learn how to meditate is to do meditation and to listen and to feel and to pay attention to your breath every day. And so it's one metaphor that I've heard from Nicole Sachs is you have to carry the water and chop the wood. That day after day, you find a methodology, and you bring in this notion this brilliant notion that Alan has of outcome independence, and you say, today I am going to be mindful. Today I'm going to listen to my emotions. And of course, at some point we definitely have to talk about somatic tracking, because if there is one key technique in PRT, that is probably the most important thing that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. But so, I was going off a little bit into Rob's take on PRT rather than.
I would think before I read everything, I would think that somatic tracking is pain reprocessing therapy.
Yeah. I mean, it is clearly the most, the sense I get from talking to Alan and reading the book is that he sees that as the key element of PRT.
Okay.
And so what is it? We go back to the core idea, the core model behind PRT. It's this idea that your brain is almost misinterpreting your pain. It's a harmless notion, but it greets it with fear and sees it as terrifying. The classic story to illustrate this is the construction worker who's walking along on a construction site, and he steps on a nail. The nail goes right through his boot. It's coming out the other side. He starts screaming. He goes to the hospital. This has been documented in medical journal. He goes to the hospital, and they take the boot off. They probably have to cut it off around his foot, and they find out that it actually went through his toes. Well, it was
between his toes.
Yeah,
and he didn't respond to any medication before the boot came off. He didn't respond to any medication, injections, opioids, and he's still screaming in pain. And then it's between his toes.
It's between his toes. So there's a situation where your brain clearly is capable of taking something which is completely harmless, might be completely normal, and turning it, as happened to me, into something which is dreadfully painful and a major, major issue in your life, causing sometimes things to snowball. And so the question is, how do we stop that? Well, we've talked about mindfulness. We've talked about meditation. We've talked about how it's a certain type of attention. You bring that type of reflective, non-judgmental attention to various parts of your body. You take the areas of your body that are scaring you. So for me, when I had myofascial pain syndrome, that would be my back. When I was getting thoracic outlet syndrome, that might be my upper trapezius, or my thumb, the writing cramps. or the back of my hand, and you just, in a non-judgmental way, you pay attention to that sensation.
Can you give us an example
Explore
of
it.
how you would do PRT on yourself if you were having that
Absolutely,
pain?
absolutely. I think that to some degree, it does help to have to have like a script or recording. Sometimes that can help. I don't think that's the way that Alan intends it to be done, though. I think he really wants us to be in control, and as you mentioned at the beginning, guiding our own recoveries. But I don't know. I should ask him about that explicitly. But I think the first step when Michelle is doing it is the first thing you do is you relax. So you do focus on the breathing, because the idea is to have a corrective experience, something that teaches you not to be afraid, not to be in pain, not to be rageful, just quiet. And so the first thing that you can do is just relax. And so for that, for me, I just like focusing on the breathing, because the breathing is always there for you. So you'll just go for a little bit, and you can breathe in, count to 3, and then breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And as you could see, I started to close my eyes there. Breathe in, breathe out. And you can see you slow down when you start paying attention to your body. You cool down. The whole tone of how you exist can be different. You take a moment to pay attention to yourself, to pay attention to your body, and to listen to yourself. And then you start, just in a curious manner, exploring various areas of your body where you're having those sensations. And you don't want to do this when you're overwhelmed by those sensations. You don't want to do this when you're feeling triggered. But insofar as you can go back and essentially reassess your symptoms, you can realize that they aren't as dangerous as you thought, that you can have those corrective experientes. So that would be my take on it. But I will say...
Could I ask you about that?
Sure.
You said about not doing this when you've been activated. So in this therapy, would you suggest to people that they give it time or something
Absolutely.
like that? So
Yeah.
just could you expand on that a little bit more? Because that's one of the things that people don't do. They don't give themselves the time to actually consciously breathe, or they don't even give themselves the time. They might be traveling on the bus to work, and they could be actually consciously breathing, but they're not. They're just watching whatever. So can you just explore that a little bit more so that our audience will actually, I see here Johnny is listening to us at the moment, and he's working.
There you go.
He also says further on that earlier on, he's got a relapse in pain. Now he's working and he's watching us, but now in that moment, he could also be consciously breathing, couldn't he, when he's working? Would you, do you know what I mean? Could you sort of
Absolutely.
explore that a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I've learned, I got to know Alan through founding the TMS Wiki in 2009. And we did a series of webinars. And so I had many chances. Those are still up on the TMS Wiki if anyone wants to listen to them. But I had many chances to listen to him as he worked with people. And I just feel like I learned so much from those. It was really, really helpful. And, for someone like Johnny, what I imagine he would say is to look at the pressure that he's putting on himself in his workplace, and how can we change the way that we react to that. And we can talk about parents, and this is where I think parents are always often in the background, or other early experiences are in the background, and in terms of the way that we treat ourselves. So you can have those intrinsic stressors. Nice way to divide things up, the intrinsic stressors versus the extrinsic stressors. Sometimes at work, you also just have extrinsic stressors and work stress. That's what Johnny was talking about. Is he's talking about work stress based, and I don't know if there's any magical way of dealing with that. I think that sometimes there are some practitioners watching Alan, watching Alan. You can see how it's almost like he's reaching into their head and kind of transforming the way that they feel. It is incredibly powerful. So sometimes you can have a practitioner who can help you with that, but many of us don't have that opportunity. And so I think that's where it does become a journey, where we on the front line at home reading the books, and even when you're done, even if you do therapy and then you move on afterward, to me, it always comes down to the work that we do at home, learning how to reconceptualize what's happening at work. And sometimes it's just basic stuff in terms of how we reassure ourselves. This is what I loved about the book group. The book group was just a bunch. It was mostly women. There were some wonderful men, but it was mostly women. And they had so much wisdom in them. And all we had to do was just pace it out. It was so wonderful to have Michelle there, but all we had to do was just pace it out week by week. And they would start talking to each other, teaching each other how to take care of themselves, teaching themselves how to be more compassionate towards themselves. And I think that was the learning process. I think that was a model that works for people. It taught them the methodology that made them be able to take care of themselves. It's not reparenting remotely, but I almost want to call it that, because you're learning how to parent yourself. You're learning how. So my mother died when I was 9, and I think that was probably, as we mentioned last time, I think that was the big reason why I had these symptoms. I think that's what led to the fear for me, the tension, the pressure. Sarna would call it the rage. I've got plenty of my own extrinsic work stress, always under stress. And so, I think
you're responsible. You're 100% responsible for it.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And perhaps also I'm compassionate about myself for it, that, that it's something I am responsible for and I hope to work on, but I'm also a work in progress, so we're all just building up our skills and trying to live a better life.
You only stop being a work in progress when you're dead.
There you go.
If you're not growing, you're dying.
Twice this week, I said to clients, you have a disease. It's called being human. Minsky said that about being human.
There's only one cure.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this work. Yeah. Is that it fundamentally, it's so much of it is about growth. Like there's the stuff that you read in the books, and then the rest is about growth.
But I want to come back to, and I know, Rose has taught me a lot over the last 2 years about this. It's not like we're learning a new habit, but we are changing our brain. I mean, neuroplasticity, we are affecting.
Right.
We are literally being a doctor and doing inner psychic surgery on ourselves by doing this work. You were going to say something, Michael?
Yeah, well, but this is where it comes back to two really simple things. We all are going to have our own very individualized journey, and yet going on that journey with other people clarifies a lot of things. If we're going into the same situation, we're going to respond to it differently, even the form of a book group, that is going to give up. We're learn if we're. This is the thing, you have to pay attention. A lot of times we get so in here that we're not even seeing the world around us. And you see that a lot in anxiety. Someone who's really anxious just can't see anything but their own fear, right? So the more that we can notice things that are going on, the more we can relate that back to ourselves and see what we're bringing to something. But what I was really getting at was it's both an individual journey. It's also a generational one. It's a cultural one. So, right, the fact that we're having this conversation now, we can really key in on the fact that this conversation 7 years ago would have been a very different conversation. And it isn't just on an individual level going into deeper into these ideas, but this is unfolding right now, right? The whole culture is slowly becoming aware of trauma. Like I read something about Ted Lasso. That is a show that turns on trauma. Every show turns someone healing a small trauma, and Ted Lasso healing a much larger one. in the context of the show, and his therapist having to heal her own. Mayor of Easttown, that's another show on HBO. It's all about trauma. So these ideas are arising so rapidly culturally, they're becoming a part of cultural narrative. And so soon, when we start to talk about trauma, people aren't going to, oh, you know, that person was nearly beat to death, and that's what trauma is. No, that person didn't get what they needed when they were a kid. And what's more important is their parents really didn't get what they needed, and their parents didn't get what they needed. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. The more we start to understand it, the more we start to do a little bit better with our children, but we still make the same mistakes. And we all have to have a little more patience for ourselves and for other people, because we're all on this journey together.
I don't know if you saw, but I had to turn around to get a pen. I haven't watched Ted Lasso, but I'm absolutely going to look it up.
Good. I was really skeptical, but as I started watching, it was like every episode, the key point is someone is moving through trauma, and they're all growing, and we see that. And as one person grows, other people grow. It's
okay,
really,
Michael.
And you've been a real cultural critic for a while. I recall, like some of your early photography of malls. Of Crux.
So I was a religious studies major, so I think about how ideas move through the world and how they don't. And it's also about, like, that's an interesting point. Is like when I took those pictures, they were just so observational that they didn't mean anything to anybody. But later on, they mean a lot because they actually capture it as it is without any pretense or saying, look at what it's just like, oh, that's what that felt like, you know? And we don't do that enough. Just sit in a space and get distance from it.
Rose, go ahead.
Could you, Michael, tell us who don't know whoever Ted Lasso is? Maybe Tova could put that on the screen.
I don't know who he is.
That's what I mean. We don't know. It must be
Ted
someone
Lasso
in America
is a
or
TV
something.
show that's on Apple TV.
Okay, can you put that? Can you type that in, Tova, for people?
What should I type in?
TEDLASSO on Apple.
Ted?
Yes.
TEDD?
No, just one D.
Just one. Yeah.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
On Apple?
And it's on Apple TV.
Yeah.
Good.
And
okay.
it got a lot of positive attention. But actually, I think
he's actually working with somebody on it and helping people by.
No. The story is based around watching people live their lives. He's basically an American football coach who gets hired to coach a British football team, soccer, right?
Oh, okay.
He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he's really running away from something at home.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what's the link that Patty's just put up?
I don't know, but I'm thanking her anyway. I want to say something. What do you think about, like, look, I know that, Michael turned Rose and I on to the presence process, which is about learning about your breath and learning about responding. I mean, all these amazing insights and skills. And, what if there was a pain reprocessing therapy like that people could come in and practice? Because I'm big on practicing and habit forming and changing the brain, and the brain can be a piece of flesh, and you have this neural pathway that just goes into, I'm going to respond to that stress, and I'm not going to feel the pressure, or I'm going to feel it, accept it, love it, embrace it, and
allow.
That's where I'd like to be able to help people more with the hands-on meat and potatoes of this process. Yes, there's other issues, and there's other things that are going to come up. It's not going to be so simple for a lot of people, but if people feel hope, people feel the hope and the belief, then that becomes a biology, that becomes a chemical. So how do people begin to trust? This is about trust too. We're going back to Michael. You're going to say something about trust?
Well, no. I was going to say, I think it's interesting, like Michael Brown, who did the presence process, didn't want people to do organized groups. But I think you found that actually having people come together was really useful to people. And, he may not, because he had his own very particular way of doing it that worked for him, and he was telling people and he developed it. That's very personal to him. The process itself is very individual, but some people, like I said early in this talk, I mentioned, sometimes it's helpful to have a therapist. I agree. It's totally not necessary. And the therapist isn't going to fix the problem. They're going to kind of, just like a parent when you're about to walk into traffic, maybe nudge you back off onto the sidewalk to help you figure out the path that that is going to be safest for you. And they have a lot of, especially when you're talking about trauma, because, with deeper levels of trauma where people just really are having such a reaction that they need to learn how to turn it into a response, which is very much what the presence process is about, is learning to take that reaction, own it, become accountable, say that was on me. I was angry at you. That's about me. And the more so if we have rage, a lot of times it's really us not being accountable for what we're feeling, right? So rage,
discharging it, pushing it out.
It's pushing it down so much that it vomits, and we feel like, well, that just happened. You made me mad. Nobody makes you mad. That's when in the present process you get mad. Then it's your job to be like, okay, well, that's about me. What is that? And take yourself out of that situation until you're able to respond rather than react, right? So back to the beginning question, I think one thing that's really important is why I'm talking about Ted Lasso or Mayor of Easttown. When we see these stories play out and we start to understand that it's okay to process, it's okay to not be super tough, right? And not be, thick-skinned. It's okay to be somewhat nakedly emotional, that it can be safe. That's how we start to heal. And it's not just pain, it's everything. So pain is the tip of the iceberg, right? And so people who have the most pain or really severe, there's a lot of other stuff going on, other co-contaminant issues, both psychologically and physically. And it can be really, really hard to dial it down enough to work on it. So a lot of people need to know that it's okay to get support, and it doesn't mean, and they also have to cultivate belief, as you were saying. Like, if you don't believe it's going to help, it's not going to help.
Don't bother.
We know this. That's biological, it's physical, it's psychological, it's chemical. Belief is important, and that's almost the most important thing. You can't make someone believe, but you can't tell them that if you don't believe, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, actually, Dr. Rains last week told us how the myelin in the grey matter is thicker when you've got early trauma, and that the pharmaceutical companies are actually looking at being able to try and target that area. I thought, how fascinating that we build up this ability to cope with our day-to-day, fight and flight and fear. Wow. Actually, our bodies change to meet that. And then, of course, when we're struck with all this illness and that, we then have to actually move through that into our inner selves to even compensate for that. Like that fear of getting better, or that fear of using your will to get out is hard work. Yeah. And it's got to be the desire, not the disbelief, but the desire to push through. And, I often think about I don't know if in America, but here, often, I'm not a big football fan, but they run through a banner. And that's really what we have to do when we've got somatic pain. We've got to actually push through to get out the other side. And it's that will to just face that wall and push through it and know that it's just a membrane. Yeah.
So true, Rose.
Yeah.
So true.
Well, yeah.
So,
all right. Well, we have taken you off track.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Well, would you like to hear about the study?
Yes,
please. Yes,
the PRT study. I think that.
And then I'll answer some of the questions that are coming up. Some comments I'd like to share with you guys. But go ahead. We'd love to hear about the study and again, the science. If people want the science to help them get into the emotion, here it is.
Absolutely. The science is absolutely key. So, and Alan tells all this in his book, but it started several years ago when the producers for a TV show sponsored, I believe, by Dr. Phil, called The Doctors, contacted Alan and said, hey, we've got this person who's come to us with very severe gastrointestinal issues, would make him pass out. It was pain. I believe it was pass out, but extremely intense symptoms. And I have a link in here somewhere there it is. But I gather we can't share video here, right? Like that isn't going to work?
Not on Be Live, not unless I have it beforehand. So next time you'll come on the show, we'll do it again.
All right, sounds good. Anyway, there's a bunch of clips in there. You can see he goes and he says, you know, can I heal this guy? And the producers, they learn about Alan's approach, and they learn that he you know, there's a talk therapy fundamentally, and they say, okay, but this is TV. We need something to show. And so they were thinking about it, and eventually what they came up with is they said, well, maybe we could take an MRI. You're talking before about how Bethany Rains was talking about, you know, how you can check the myelination, how the myelination changes based on the level of stress you've had. You can the question here is, can you look at the brain and see connections between different areas of the brain and how that changes in response to pain? And activation of various different regions. And that's exactly what they did with Casey. So they brought him on the show. They introduced him to Alan, and they said, you know, Alan is gonna work with you. And he made some progress. They brought him back later on, and at the link that I just sent out, maybe you want to forward that into the general chat, Tova. You can watch the original clips from this show.
Yeah.
As Casey heals.
I never heard this story. Did you, Rose? I never heard this.
It's the best story ever. Everyone, you have to watch these clips. They are really amazing clips. Click through. I've lined them all up, and you can see this person as he's having his life transformed. You can see, you know, just doubled over, and he couldn't play the sports that he loved. He was, you know, a baseball player, and you know, he got that back. He got his life back. And at the end, they show him actually, you know, batting practice as Alan has helped him overcome the very natural, very human fear that he has about these fears. And yeah, so that is but the key thing here is that they did get those MRIs and they put them up, and they showed a difference that you could see on his brain, different areas being activated before and after. Well, one thing led to another, and I think that Howard Schubiner might have been involved with this. He spoke to one of the foremost pain and brain scan experts in the world, Dr. Tor Wager, and the idea was conceived of doing a larger trial of this, saying, okay, you did it for Casey. Can you do this for a larger group? And that's when things got exciting. They had a GoFundMe, and to help support that GoFundMe, the TMS Wiki had a lot of traffic, and they said, you know, Alan donated this amazing step-by-step 21-day multimedia program to the wiki as a way of, which you can find it. It's the new multimedia program. Just Google Alan Gordon TMS Wiki. But he donated that, and that's how I got pretty intimately
Pain
involved.
recovery program.
Yes, exactly.
For those 21 days, because I didn't realize that's connected to pain reprocessing therapy. I mean, like I think it's just learning about your brain, learning what happens, you know. Like,
no, that program was 21 days because we on the wiki had found that, you know, PACE programs like that worked. And I said, can we integrate something into the forum to make it more group oriented? Because as we've been discussing, that can really help. And so, the GoFundMe was a huge success. From a tax perspective, the Psychophysiologic Disorders Association helped with that, and they were able to raise not just enough money to fund the study, but also enough to get a documentary, seed funding for the documentary, and that's where Michael, of course, is very familiar with how challenging that can be, so that started the movie Pain Brain, which is approaching release. So they did the study, and the results of the study were absolutely stunning. It happened in Boulder, Colorado, and overseen by University of Colorado Boulder. And it was, let's see, I'm going to have to pull up the studies. But it was recently, I think Medline listed it as one of the most notable studies of the year recently. You know, it's the New
Yeah,
Year.
it was one of the top 5% of studies that were viewed last year.
There you go. There you go. And that is
Wow.
so important because, again, well, patients and practitioners are so important in terms of getting the word out. And they need something like a study, a carefully done university study that could show and document the progress. I mean, we've seen these recoveries for so long that we take them for granted because we've lived them ourselves. But the actual results are pretty stunning, quite stunning, in terms of the number of people who had very significant recoveries. More than half of them did, and these results held up in a 6-month follow-up, which really is unheard of in pain studies, because if you don't know, if they don't have a good model, a good understanding of what causes the pain, then how are they going to fix it? And that was the
Exactly.
problem before,
Yeah.
but now they're making progress. So it's been very exciting to see.
Could I also mention for our guests that there are many pain clinics, and actually, hopefully, we've got Robbie watching at the moment, who's just been to a pain clinic, and she wasn't given any help. Are you still there, Robbie? It was really interesting that they can't go to the source of the pain problem. They just want to deal with the pain itself,
Right.
and not the issues that have come up. But obviously, I don't think she's watching at the moment. But she has got a really strong story to tell, and I'm sure that many others have been to pain clinics. And actually, recently on one of the emails, there was a conversation by two of the doctors saying that the major pain clinics, maybe Mayo, I can't remember which one of those in America, have actually said there's no cure for pain, for somatic pain. So you've got to patients have to actually turn away from the people that should be supporting them to what Forrest is talking about, that pain reprocessing idea, that this pain needs to be observed in a manner that's about the other issues in their lives, not about the physical pain in a particular part of your body, but the pain in your heart for the other things that are happening in your life. Oh, here we are. Look at this. Yeah, Robbie says they teach management only. And you see, this is what Forrest is saying. It's not about pain management. It's about actually diving into your own inner life and seeing what's happening in your inner life. Yeah.
When I went
Thanks, Robbie.
When I went to go interview Dr. Turk in Seattle, he was really adamant that I not shoot a sign that he had on his wall which said pain maintenance clinic. Because that had actually,
Yeah, right.
I don't blame him for blocking you on that, by the way.
But
It might have been self-preservation.
That's the sign that had been up for a while. It was about how to, like maintain your car or maintain your body, but how to deal with it. But it really was about maintaining it because it wasn't dealing with the actual problem.
And so I've managed to pull up the results. There's one image in the study which I think is particularly great in terms of summarizing it. The key thing which I like is the number of people who were pain-free or nearly pain-free, by the end of the study, and with the 1-year follow-up, over half of them were pain-free or nearly pain-free. Right. That is not pain maintenance. That is
right. It was more like 72% actually.
72% immediately after treatment, something like 55 the year follow-up. So, yeah, both numbers are amazing.
And in the same kind of week, I think it was, there was a study out of Beth Israel or Harvard in Boston, which was based directly on Dr. Sarno's work, that had very similar results and didn't get nearly as much attention, but it was a big part of the Washington Post piece about it as well.
Yeah, the Danino study.
Yeah. Well, at least it's up there now.
I want to share with you, Forrest and Michael and Rose, some different comments from some of our listeners. And What's amazing also is because it is in the middle of the day in New York, and morning in Australia, our YouTube channel is being watched by so many people. We have a YouTube channel and there's now over 500, almost 600 subscribers.
Wow, I haven't looked at it for a while. Wow, that's fantastic.
Because I would love the live to be that everyone could see it, but it's like not possible. So that's my angst, and I'll deal with that and do some pain reprocessing therapy. But in the meantime, I'm really happy when there's people live that come. So I just want to say hello to Scotty. You are like really the pillar, consistently show up. Doran, I think Doran, you're in Israel. No, you're somewhere in Europe, Doran. And Sebastian, you're new. Nice to meet you, watching from France. And I just want to put up Sebastian's comment. Here's his comment for us to read. After 3.25 years, TMS world, I tend to think that most of the diseases could be eased by a mind-body approach. 100% on live on camera, 100%. I'm behind you. And there's research. There's research to back this up.
There's also, I want to tell you something about lupus, which is interesting. I met a woman.
Let me finish a comment, then I would love you to answer. I include my own autoimmune lupus in this, which is an arthritic component. I'm not mistaken, lupus. Process along tons of symptoms and definitely see that it's changing. It's life-changing. I consider lupus as a medical label. If you forget labels, which are prison to me, you can do the emotional work and start your healing journey. Unlearn pain and symptoms. Yes, unlearn labels also. Right. Hallelujah.
Well, I just want to say that these things, they're not just individually based. They're incredibly culturally based as well. So I was talking to a woman on a plane whose daughter had lupus, and when she was within graduate school and school at the same time. And she asked me, because I was talking about the movie, if I thought it might be connected. And I said, definitely. And her daughter is African-American, as she was. And I went to the lupus website, and the lupus website literally stated, lupus discriminates against women, especially African-American women. So women get lupus twice as much as men. African-American women get it 4 times more than white women. Latino women get it 3 times more. And Asian-American women get it twice as much as white women. And so if you actually put that on a piece of paper, what you're looking at with all of that data is a chart of relative privilege. So people who have less privilege, there's a constant demand on them to repress who they are because they are at risk of being kicked out of society. I mean, think if you are a woman and a Black woman trying to get a graduate degree and a law degree, and you are challenging the people above you, you're not going to last, right? And so these incredible amounts of socially constructed pressures are also a really big part of this. And it's important to understand that. And it's important to not then go, oh, I have even more reason to be rageful, but more awareness. And also understand that the people who are also involved in doing those things are also aware of what they're doing. And that's how all this social reckoning is also really involved with the same rising of trauma. It's also really dangerous in terms of us not being aware of what's going on. That's why I wanted to bring that up.
Really, I smell a movie.
I mean, but the data was there. You can't deny that data, right? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the beauty.
Sure, but we get lupus here. I mean, I've looked after lupus patients, and they were all Caucasian. So
right, but
it's got to be something to do with socioeconomic.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's important to keep those things in mind as well.
Very important.
Yeah.
So Johnny checked in, and we're happy that you're painting as you're watching. You're multitasking, which is an amazing skill. Robbie, I always love when you come and you share with us. Hannah Flicker, I think you're in Israel, Hannah. Maybe breathing is a good way to relax. I love it. I'd like to know the facts. Wait, every minute I breathe, or it depends on your speed? Isn't there a fact like every minute you inhale or exhale, or some fact about that?
At least once, I'll tell you that. You're not going to last very long.
What I love, I'm very humbled about what I learned recently, and this Dr. Bethany Rains taught us so much. Number one, that pain is an emotion and it is processed in the same place as And my patient today said, "Well, I don't feel my grief in my body." I'm like, "You do." Like she says, you realize that the pain. See, it's like,
problem, honey. You're not feeling it if that's the problem.
Yes, like
you're disconnected.
This is so fascinating that she said that. But the one thing I'm humbled because I didn't know this, but that when we inhale and we exhale, it's always a little bit longer, and that's activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's calming me down. And that's like my
Right,
yoga
but if you
teacher.
can,
Yeah, go ahead.
but you can do that intentionally by breathing out more slowly.
Deliberately.
It
Yeah.
calms
There you go.
so that you can take. I mean, our breath will happen automatically, and it will often happen automatically in not such great ways. So the more that we can kind of like recognize that and slow it down, breathe out slower, then we can tell our body we're safe. I mean, a lot of this work is also about just it's about noticing what's going on, but also realizing that your brain does have the wrong signal. It's telling you that you're not safe, but you have to be the captain of the ship. Like the captain.
There you go.
Like,
Yep.
oh my God, what's going on? You know, the whole ship falls apart, right? The captain has to hold course.
The navigator, the pilot,
of your brain.
Yeah, there you go.
the head
A good
nurse.
pilot.
The head nurse.
A
And
good pilot.
Rita is here. In fact, thank you so much, Forrest Rob Munger. I love you no matter what your name is, who you are, and ever your identity. You introduced us to Rita and Tamara, and we just we're having them back on our show because
Oh, good.
lovely, two amazing women.
So
Michael,
lovely.
two amazing
That's
women
amazing
that healed
people.
themselves from CRPS, which is possible.
Yeah.
This is possible.
It shows just how
it's a choice. This is amazing.
It is such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for creating this space. For
Oh my
creating,
God.
it is wonderful to see these ideas being
Have
discussed.
we, before we finish off, have we got the links that we can put up on here for what you were that program, that show? Have you given those to
absolutely.
Toba?
Go
So-
to it's simply prtrecovery.org. You can see all the links there, but most important,
PRT recovery.
.org. That's all it is prtrecovery.org. But as much as the community produced things are useful, I do want to emphasize this is only I'm talking about Forrest stuff here. If you really want to get the real PRT, make sure you get the book, The Way Out. I took the cover off, unfortunately. But The Way Out, that's where you can see the real PRT. That is the methodology where he's talking about somatic tracking. He lays out all of the ideas. He gives you the science behind it, and that's what he used in that study. So this is the Bible of PRT.
And if it's not in the book, and there's things on the internet. There's even Alan Gordon talking with Mayim Belek.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible one that I put up with him working with that woman in one of Howard Truppener's seminars, working with the woman with neck pain.
Oh, that was the video I wanted to watch. Yeah, with us.
So that I've been putting that up, and I will continue to put that up. I also want to just thank you, Patty. You're also here a lot, and I think we met you through Michael, Patty Clark's in Florida, and you're on your healing journeys. You and Johnny. Johnny calls himself Johnny. When I want to look at it, Johnny Limitless Sanchez. If that's what it takes to change your name. I mean, I wasn't born Tova. I'm Terry, and now I'm Tova. I'm changing my name all the time. If that's what it takes, like whatever it takes to remind yourself, a tattoo, a name change, whatever it takes to keep on your journey. I'm in all of you guys that you just stay on your journey. And Sarah Lynn Fuller is from Canada. And so a couple more just okay, so I'm going to answer questions.
Responding to there, I'll take it. Forrest, when I overdo it in the day, the sympathetic system fires off in the night. In sleep, and pain increases. Any thoughts on this? Hands stimulate pain too. I think you've laid it out right there, right? Like, isn't that a terrific, Alan talks about evidence sheets. Isn't that a terrific thing to put down on your evidence sheet? And this is, I think, a perfect example where I think what the answer is. You know that there's a connection, that there's that mind-body connection between what's happening in the day and what's going on in the evening. And that's this theme that we've covered. It's about drawing those connections yourself. So yeah, I think definitely it is when you overdo it in the day, the sympathetic system, for those who are watching, is the part that kind of hypes you up, so to speak. It's part of your nervous system, the autonomic unconscious part of your nervous system. And so, yes, that is an indication of those emotions. You can call it rage, you can call it fear. Something's going on in your system and something needs to be taken care of. And as Michael said, it's how you respond to it. Pilot that ship the way that he's suggesting.
Right. So if you
Very
notice
well
you've
said.
done it during the day, right, then you have to do some unwinding before you go to bed. And if, for me, sometimes I'll wake up and I don't, and if I find myself kind of in a pattern of tossing and turning, I get out of bed. I go and I sit and I'll do some breathing. I'll do some yoga. But if you kind of try to stay in that space without addressing it, it's just going to keep going. So I think a lot of people have this problem with, waking up with a little bit of anxiety and being like nervous about the anxiety. So they try to go back to sleep. And then they're like, oh no, I'm not going to get enough sleep. And you just drive it. Get out of bed, really. Just get out of bed, go sit in a chair, sit on the floor, meditate for 5 minutes if that's what it takes. Do a little bit of breathing, drink a little
That's
water.
what Robbie does, actually.
Yeah. And then get back in bed and you'll find that you fall back asleep, because you have to do that slow breathing to tell your brain that you're safe. And the more that you do that, the more your brain's not doing it to you. Your brain is actually repeating what it has learned it needs to do. So you're not being mad at your brain. And
very important point. That's science, isn't that? That's got to be a key. That
right.
This neuroplasticity. It's not just a word we're throwing around. This is real, and isn't
you throw it around a lot, though?
I do.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, we're catching
Throw it around. It's a great word.
Because I want people. Look, remember what David Hanscom has a book list, and before I even met him, and we've all met him now, he one of it was called the Talent Code, and it was all about these major famous people who had to learn. And how did they learn? By messing up, falling and getting up, and falling and get up, and falling and getting up. And I'm going to keep falling, but I got to keep getting up. That's life. Isn't that the thing about
Don't get up so fast. Don't get up so fast. Take it easy on yourself.
You're right. I should go down a little bit longer and be in the moment. You're exactly right. I'm getting up too fast.
There you go.
Oh, dear. I love it.
Slow and low. That is the tempo.
That's right.
And
Slow
also,
it down.
What I want to hear a little bit more about, I want to just go back we have a few minutes. I can pull an all-nighter hanging out with you guys. But listen to this. What did Alan Gordon, first of all, if he created this, but he must have got it from somewhere. That's what I want to go. Like, nothing new was under the sun. So was it exposure therapy? Was it something else? Was it mindfulness?
Yeah. Where did he get it from? I mean,
if
I can speak metaphorically, love. I mean, I think that it was something, what worked for him, trying to save himself, trying to save his patients, evolving over time. I mean, I remember the first time I started hearing about somatic tracking, it was during the fundraiser for the study. And, I think that thing was evolving. And I think it was, I think that there have been different approaches to this type of healing for a while. And this is the approach of focusing on, it's very much an in the moment approach. The current moment that we're experiencing has foundations in the past. So the past cannot be ignored, but it's also saying, how do I feel right now? How is my body feeling right now? Teaching my body that right now my hand is fine. To me, that sounds like a very present-based thing. So I think it was just working with patients, listening to the patients with his heart. That's my guess, but I don't know. You'd have to ask him how he came up with it. I'm just glad that he did. And that's synthesizing so many other ideas that are out there.
Yeah.
What,
We see in ISTDP, we follow the patient. We don't call it somatic tracking. We ask them, what's happening in your gut at the moment? What's happening in your arms? What's happening in your shoulder? Oh, have you become confused? So we're actually helping the patient track their anxiety pathways. And then as this happens, or they forget something, they'll realize that their anxiety level is up so high that they can't compute with what's going on. Or, smooth muscle anxiety, we actually teach them that that's a form of anxiety. So that's another form of somatic tracking, but it's not called somatic tracking. So, we've got all these sort of funnels of people that have got all this knowledge, but they don't integrate them. And it's tragic in a way.
Sometimes I feel like there's only like 5 ideas, but there's many ways of describing them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think what's beautiful is that, when people go on these mind body, all of these Facebook pages, they're trying to capture something like, this is going to work for me. It's going to work for me. And it's all going to work. Choose one of them. What resonates? I mean, here's Michael doing yoga, with and that's resonating with him. And yet,
and that's where it comes to listening in this journey that you go on to figure out how to heal yourself. And to some degree, you just try something and you do it for a month. Give yourself that time. Allow yourself to do the process and trust the process.
Forrest, the other thing is just giving yourself 1 month is nothing.
Yeah.
When you say that.
For one method. Yeah.
Yeah. And also Patty's talking about Peter Levine. Peter Levine, I've done training with him. I can't think, what is it called? Calls the fear, the crouching.
Somatic experiencing.
But the crouching tiger in the room. And it's, if you could, people talk about the elephant in the room, but it might be better to see it as the crouching tiger in the room, and that's what's creating the fear. But in actual fact, when you open your eyes, there's no tiger. It's a fear from the past, as if you are going to be punished again or whatever. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's like the person you were saying didn't experience grief. It's being so disconnected from what you're feeling that you feel like it's impossible to address it. And that's why sometimes when it gets to a place, sometimes someone who can help you, I mean, essentially, like if you're looking at the Peter Levine thing or the Bessel van der Kolk, I don't know how you would call it anything but somatic tracking. They're noticing what people are doing and helping people notice what they're doing and what they're feeling in their body and what their body is telling them. Like, are they hunched over? Are they open and expressive? It's all this. Honestly, it's all the same fucking thing. It's just recognizing the body and mind are one system. They are not separate. You really can't separate them. And it's brains that want to do that and want to see visual evidence. But we all have different ways of processing information, and nothing's going to work for one person, for everyone all the same, right? So everybody's going to be able to bring their own thing to it, which is why it's not that there's one superhero person who's going to solve the problem. It's all of this kind of recognizing that it's all the same thing, and that we both bear individual responsibility for ourselves, but also for how we relate to other people. And we also have to really dig deep to find empathy for those who think have harmed us, right? Because they're not harming us because they want to. They're harming us because they were harmed. And the more that we recognize it, we realize that we hold us under our own selves under this incredible pressure to be perfect, right? So if you can't have empathy for someone else, you can't have empathy for yourself. So there's just a lot of work to be done to become centered, aware, and emotionally responsible, really. And that is the start of the path. And once you can get to a place of saying, like your come to Jesus moment, I accept my responsibility for the way my emotions impact other people. It doesn't mean you have to repress them more. It means you have to accept them. And then they don't blast out of you like a dinosaur's diarrhea.
Very good. Michael, you reminded me of, your interview with Gabor Mate and his melancholy look.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, he's so brilliant, and it's so funny just how direct he is. But also quite intense. That made me think one thing. One comment that's jumped out of this whole thing and just hung over this room was at the beginning, Forrest. You said, before you said that your mother died when you were 9, you said, will I ever be able to take care of myself? Like, when you said your mother died, of course you felt that way. Yeah, right? But that, of course, because that was a real practical thing. If I'm in pain, will I be able to take care of myself? But if you're in pain, you can't take care of yourself, and there's probably someone needs to come take care of me.
I'm going to be in pain to get attention for someone to take care of me.
But it's not intentional. It's not intentional.
No, but this is a different. Yeah.
It's all.
It was. Whenever I tried an activity, it would begin hurting, and my doctors would say I couldn't do it anymore because I was damaging myself. Oh, it was terrifying. Right. I just wanted to work. I just wanted to support myself.
Why did you trust those fools?
I know, right?
Oh, Michael, you're naughty.
Well, it's insane.
So
The medical
listen,
system is literally.
I'm gonna deal with the. So I also want people to know that they're not alone. We all go through it. We're all human. We're all having anxiety. We all have going on our own healing journeys. That's what I love about all the doctors that come on. The humility that sits in the PBDA Association of people just, David. I'm just in awe of this community and letting people know that there's enormous amount of support and we're here for you. So what I want to do is, since I'm the pilot of this Be Live show tonight, I want to put on the.
I thought you were going to say you wanted to go to bed.
No. I want to put on this video that Michael, you and I did about the show because it's a really nice piece of public relations, and I really love it. So I'm practicing, and I can only practice in the stress. I can't practice alone, so I'm a little anxious about it, but I want to do it. So I'm sort of talking us through it. So basically, I can't put it on with all of us here.
Okay, I'll go.
So no, don't go yet. So
are you escaping? Are you?
No, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, but not to end the show. I'm going to bring us out of the studio and say goodbye to everybody. And remember, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a chiropractor, rehabilitation specialist, a pain, help it. But I'm not. This is like new for me. After 2 years, so I'm practicing.
She's pretty cool, folks, that she can actually run this thing.
Well, and I'm practicing a new habit, and I get a lot of anxiety around it.
Bravo for taking the risk.
No, I've gone to Rose enough about this anxiety, so now I'm ready.
Good.
So what I'm going to do is say goodbye to everyone. And
can I say one thing?
Yes, please.
I just reminded. I was almost going to say at the last book group meeting that we had last week, my co-host called out, and I had to do it myself. I had to do my first guided relaxation thing ever, just kind of spontaneously. I was like, I'm going to do it. So I feel you on the taking the risk. Did you get some hives? Did you get some hives or something? I did not get hives. It was relaxing, and I'm sure someone else who was more experienced could have done it better, but I feel great that I did it myself.
Can I ask you, is there more book groups happening that people can join?
That's what I feel like I need to say. Go to prtrecovery.org. We're going to start one up very soon, probably either next Sunday or the Sunday after. Go to prtrecovery.org, or even better, there's a Facebook group called Tell Me Where Your Pain Is. Tell Me Where Your Pain Is. It is Alan Gordon's Facebook group. If you don't want to buy the book is great. It's totally worth it. But if you don't want to, don't. But go to the Facebook group instead. We'll announce the book group there, and we're really excited about it. Another Recovery made a curriculum for us the second time through. It's going to be really great, and we'd love to have you there and chat with you and meet you and say hi if you found out about us through this amazing video that Tova and Rose and Michael are doing.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Anyone want to say goodbye? Finale from Michael or Rose? Anything else you want to say?
And goodbye, everyone, until next week.
Okay.
And please join us again next week when we bring you another guest.
Absolutely.
Yes, exciting.
And another guest.
Yes.
Etc.
Tova forever.
Keep the discussion going.
Yeah. Tova always says Monday night, but she forgets that it's not Monday night for us.
Tuesday
morning. So for Asia and Australia,
yes,
it's Tuesday morning.
Yes.
So
we are
early.
Global. We are global all over the world. So I'm going to bring you guys down from the studio, and then I would love any of you in the audience to stay and see this wonderful video about our show that Rose and Michael and I did to talk a little bit about TMS Roundtable. It's about a minute and a half. So have a wonderful night. Bless you all. Thank you so much for joining. Good night.
Thank you all.
God bless. 1 second, I'm bringing.
My name is Michael Galinsky, and I'm a filmmaker. I've made a film about Dr. John Sarno and his mind-body approach to medicine. And in the course of taking that film around the world, I met Rose Hoey in Australia and Dr. Tova Goldfein in Israel. And together, we decided to pool our resources and work together to spread the message of mind-body medicine.
So I'm Dr. Tova Goldfein, and I've had the privilege of helping many, many people in chronic pain and with autoimmune disease take responsibility and live a quality life. And like Michael, I've had the privilege of studying Dr. John Sarno's methods, along with many other doctors that have taken the methods a step further. The movie All the Rage is a blessing, is a mitzvah, and it has helped thousands of people manage and come out of chronic pain.
My name is Rose Hoey. I'm an ISTDP psychotherapist and a registered nurse, and I have the wonderful privilege of spending time with patients, helping them to see what they don't want to see, the issues that have hurt them for so long. We are doing this show because we know that you can heal too.
Exactly. So together, weekly, we come on with therapists and doctors and movie producers and people that have self-healed from chronic disease and from chronic pain and autoimmune disease. And we hope to continue weekly meeting you and educating you and helping you self-heal.